Hello, you are watching Shalom World News. I'm Rory McLennan coming to you from Glasgow, Scotland. Here are the latest headlines from around the world. Homeless people on the streets of León in Nicaragua have been left hungry since Brazilian missionary nuns from the Institute of the Poor of Jesus Christ were expelled from the country on the orders of the regime on the 3rd of July. The sisters were not permitted to continue their work in the Central American nation by President Daniel Ortega and have been forced to seek refuge in El Salvador. The three missionaries, including two Brazilians and a Paraguayan, were taken to Managua and then deported to El Salvador, where colleagues from the Order's Salvadoran mission welcomed them. Meanwhile, a CID Gallup survey reveals that 56% of Nicaraguans consider that corruption in the country has increased in the last 6 months. The poll was held between June the 14th and the 20th, with over 800 citizens taking part in it. The survey also identifies the Catholic Church as Nicaragua's most credible institution. A court in eastern Libya has sentenced 5 people to life in prison after finding them guilty of human trafficking. This comes in the wake of the deaths of 11 migrants while they were trying to cross the Mediterranean to reach Europe. The court in the city of Baida also sentenced 9 other defendants to 15 years in prison each. A statement from the Office of the General Prosecutor said that 24 others were given 1-year prison sentences. It claimed that the accused were part of a network that smuggled illegal migrants from Libya into Europe. The horrific conditions that migrants are subjected to while being trafficked and smuggled over the Mediterranean have long been condemned by the United Nations and rights organisations. The US state of Virginia now has a statute protecting churches from discriminatory governmental regulation. The law states that no rule, regulation or order issued by the governor or other governmental entity shall impose restrictions on the operation of a place of worship that are more restrictive than the restrictions imposed on any other business, organisation or activity. The bill's sponsor, Ren Williams, declared in a news release that the protection marked a spectacular win for people of all faiths across Virginia. The bill passed the state Senate by 35-5 earlier on this year. Williams introduced the bill in response to former Democratic Governor Ralph Northam's closure of churches and places of worship during the COVID-19 pandemic, while allowing businesses to operate. Before being signed by Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin, the GOP-backed law was approved by both the Democratic and Republican-controlled chambers of the state legislature. More than 200 children received their first Holy Communion in Iraq last week. Chaldean Bishop Bashar Matti Warda of Erbil presided over the Divine Liturgy, during which 23 children received Holy Communion for the first time at the Martyrs Church in Shaqlawa. He also offered the Divine Liturgy at the al-Mauna Church in Ankawa, where 66 others also received their first Holy Communion. As many as 65 boys and girls made their first communion at the St. Joseph Cathedral in Ankawa, while the church dedicated to Saints Peter and Paul witnessed a similar ceremony during which 89 children received the body and blood of Christ for the first time. In his sermons, Bishop Warda stressed the importance of the family in raising children. A Nigerian Catholic priest and 3 others were freed by abductors in Ebonyi State after they spent 2 days in captivity. Chancellor of Abakaliki Diocese, Father Uzoma Upoke, said all 4 captors were released unharmed and credited the outcome to the work of prayer. He also thanked State Governor Francis Nwifuru and security agencies for their efforts in securing their unconditional release. It was on Monday that unidentified armed men abducted Father Joseph Azubuike and the 3 others. The abducted priest serves as the parish priest of St. Charles Parish in the Isu community in the Onitsha local government area. He was abducted close to his parish while returning from pastoral duties. Nigeria is witnessing a rise in abductions and violence. The chairman of the US Conference of Catholic Bishops Committee on Migration has hailed the implementation of a new family reunification parole process for citizens of Colombia, El Salvador, Guatemala and Honduras. It was on the 7th of July that the US Department of Homeland Security announced new processes as part of the Biden administration's plan to manage regional migration. This was first hinted at in April, ahead of the termination of the Title 42 public health policy. Chairman of the committee, Bishop Mark Sides, said family unity and reunification are foundational to the US immigration system and are central tenets of Catholic social teaching. He said family relations contribute decisively to the sound building of a human society in fellowship. On Tuesday, the United Nations Security Council failed to reach a consensus on extending a key Syria aid route, thereby cutting off a vital lifeline to millions of people. This comes as humanitarian needs are at an all-time high in the Middle Eastern country after more than 12 years of war and a devastating quake that killed thousands in February. The United Nations and its allies hoped for a 12-month extension of the aid mandate, which allows for the humanitarian route. During a vote at the United Nations headquarters in New York, Russia vetoed a 9-month extension of the agreement presented by Brazil and Switzerland. The proposed extension received the support of 13 of the Council's 15 members and Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, while another permanent member, China, chose to abstain. On the other hand, a Russian resolution for a 6-month extension of aid delivery was only backed by China. In a letter written to mark the 700th anniversary of the canonization of St. Thomas Aquinas, Pope Francis has recalled the legacy of the famous theologian by describing him as a man of the Church. To celebrate the 700th anniversary on the 18th of July at Fossa Nuova Abbey in Italy, the Holy Father appointed the prefect of the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints, Cardinal Marcello Semeraro, as his special envoy. In his letter, the Pope said that charity always enlightened the Dominican saint. He added that St. Thomas Aquinas wrote many works, taught countless subjects, and was well qualified in the philosophical and theological disciplines. In a letter to the Italian bishops, Pope Francis made note of the Thomistic Triennium, in which the 750th anniversary of the saint's death in 2024 and the 8th centenary of his birth in 2025 will be commemorated, in addition to the 700th anniversary of his canonization. The Melkite Greek Catholic Church has declared a Jubilee year in 2024 in commemoration of the 300th anniversary of its reunion with Rome. It was on the 11th of July that Patriarch Iosif Apsi declared the Jubilee announcement, entitled The Greek Melkite Catholic Church, An Ecumenical Journey 1724 to 2024. The declaration was made at the Patriarchate in Rabui in Lebanon. The Jubilee year will begin on the 11th of November in the Syrian capital city of Damascus, with a solemn Divine Liturgy presided over by the Patriarch. Liturgical celebrations, conferences, publications and historical and theological studies will be among the hallmarks of the Jubilee year, as well as expos on the spiritual and artistic heritage of the Melkites. The Melkite Church traces its origin to the Christian community of Antioch, founded by the Holy Apostle St. Peter. After centuries of separation from Rome, full communion was restored in 1724. The Catholic Church in India is helping people in the northern part of the country who are suffering from heavy flooding, landslides and torrential rains that have claimed more than 40 lives. Many areas in the Simla Chandigarh diocese were severely affected by the unusually heavy and abrupt rains that have caused floods and landslides over the last 3 days. The diocesan bishop, Ignatius Mascarenhas, added that the church and volunteers were working round the clock to provide the affected with food, lodging and medicine. Meanwhile, due to heavy rains in the Mongolian capital city of Ulaanbaatar since the 3rd of July, the surging waters of the Selby and Toul rivers have caused severe flooding. The government estimates that 128,000 individuals have been impacted, with property being damaged by the floods. More than 20,000 people have been displaced and sent to secure locations where they urgently require food and other necessities. In the Portuguese capital city Lisbon, the main stage of World Youth Day, which will be hosting 2 papal events, is almost complete. During the weekend, the main stage at the Campo da Graça at Parque Tejo was completed 3 weeks before the world's largest youth gathering begins. This stage will be the site of the Vigil of the Holy Father with young men and women on the 5th of August and Mass the very next day. The Lisbon City Council has said that the main structure will be assembled over the coming days. Modelled on the Vasco da Gama Bridge, the light metallic structure spans 3,250 square metres. Meanwhile, the Holy See has unveiled a new commemorative stamp for World Youth Day in Lisbon, after the previous one was criticised for its reference to the Portuguese colonial era. The new stamp features the World Youth Day Lisbon logo, as designed by Portuguese designer Beatriz Roque Antunes. And those are your latest headlines. Do join us again tomorrow for more. And do remember, you can always visit swnews.org for more updates. Shalom.